I remember the day it all began. He came bursting in like a ball of energy going, the bush was on fire, the bush, it was burning with flames, the bush was on fire. So the bush was on fire, honey, in the desert, bushes catch on fire. It's not that strange. No, but the bush, it was on fire, but it wasn't burning up. Even though it had flames, it wasn't burning up, and then spoke to me. I am. You are Moses. Are you feeling all right? No, I am spoke to me. Yahweh, the God of the Hebrew people, my God. He spoke to me through the burning bush, and he said, I've got to go to Egypt, to Pharaoh, and I've got to demand that he lets the Hebrew people go. You've got to go to Egypt, to Pharaoh, and tell him to let all his slaves go. Yes! Now, honey, I love you. And you know, I think you've got so many great qualities, but honey, public speaking is not one of them. I know. I told him that, but he's going to send Aaron. Your brother Aaron? Yes, yeah, he's going to send Aaron. Okay, yeah, that could work. Yeah, and I'm going to be like God, and I'm going to tell Aaron the message, and Aaron's going to tell it to Pharaoh. Here we go. Okay, so you're going to be like God and tell Aaron. Okay, fine. Okay, when do we need to go? Now, yes. Now, I like to think that I'm a supportive wife, but my head was in a complete spin. I had to get my thoughts together, go, right, okay, all right, yes. Okay, we can go to Egypt. So we did. We packed up, we've got two boys, Gershom and Eliza, and we packed up their stuff. We packed up all our stuff. We said goodbye to my father and my sisters. We saddled up the donkeys and we set off for Egypt. Well, Moses was just full of that burning bush story, and he was telling the boys all the way along. He was saying, and then I had to throw my staff onto the ground and it turned into a snake, boys. And then God told me to pick it up by its tail. And as I did, it turned back into the staff. Yes, but you are not to pick up a snake by its tail. No, never. Because it can turn around and bite you. You never pick a snake up by its tail. Yeah, but God told me. I know God told you. That's great, darling. But boys, never do it, okay? He's not going to ask you to do that. Well, it seemed like quite a long journey. But finally, we started coming into Egypt, and you could see it. The glittering, shimmering temples in the golden sun. It was so impressive. But as we got closer, we could hear the moans and the groans of the Hebrew people. They were slaves. Women, men, children, boys the same age as Gershom and Eliza, and they were covered in dirt and sweat, and they were down in the mud making bricks out of straw in the blistering heat. It made me sick to my stomach. But we carried on. We walked around and we went into Goshen, and that's where all the Hebrews lived in Egypt. And there we found the elders of the Hebrew people, and one of them put us up. And Moses told them why he was there. And so the next day, Moses and Aaron and some of the elders of the Hebrews went to see Pharaoh. Well, how did it go? He hates us, Zipporah. You should see the hatred in his eyes. He hates the Hebrew people. He hates me. He hates our God. And he won't let them go. He refuses. Well, what are you going to do? I don't know, but God said that he's going to keep hardening Pharaoh's heart so that he keeps saying no. Why? Because God wants the whole of Egypt to know that Yahweh is the Lord and there is no other. But Pharaoh, he's going to harden his heart every time, and God's going to show his wonders. Wonders? I said. Wonders. Oh, they were fearful. I remember the first one. Aaron put his staff into the river Nile, and Pharaoh was there on the Nile, and as he put the staff in, the water turned into blood, actual blood. All the fish died, and then I saw Egyptians, they were digging in all of the riverbanks, trying to dig holes, searching for drinking water, because when you're in the heat of the desert and you don't have drinking water, things get desperate pretty quickly. And so they were all digging, and Pharaoh, apparently, his magicians, they got a bowl of water and turned that into blood. So then Pharaoh was like, ha ha ha, laughed it off. I mean, why would you make more blood? Anyway, so Pharaoh found that laughable. But then the next thing that God sent was the frogs. Frogs, I mean, a frog by a pond, it's kind of cute. But when you go to get your undergarments out of your basket and you find frogs all in there, that's gross. There were just frogs everywhere. They were boiling out of the river Nile, out of ponds, out of every river. There was just frogs everywhere. So then Pharaoh said, okay, you can take your people to go and worship your God. But the moment the frogs disappeared, he said, no. And so Aaron, he stamped the staff into the ground and a great big cloud of dust appeared. And the dust turned into gnats, tiny little gnats that went everywhere. I mean, great big clouds of black gnats just on everything. But the moment the last gnat died, Pharaoh said no. And then came the flies, big, fat, black flies. They were in the Egyptians' wigs, they were in their ears, they were in their food, they were in just everywhere. Except Goshen. There was no flies in Goshen. It was just all of Egypt had flies everywhere. But when the last fly dropped dead, when Pharaoh relented, he changed his mind again. And then God sent a deadly disease on the livestock. I was walking down the road one day and I saw this great big horse, and it just fell on its side and started convulsing. I saw sheep and goats and cows frothing at the mouth and dying. And the Egyptians, they piled up all the dead carcasses in great big piles. Some of them burnt them and some of them just left them. And Elisa was like, oh, Mummy, what is that smell? It's the smell of rotting dead animals, darling. It was so disgusting. And then God sent the boils. I remember because that day I had a bit of a spot, zit on my chin, and I felt a bit, But that day I saw a woman, an Egyptian woman, and she had boils. Her skin just broke out in pustules all over her skin, by her eye, around her ear, everywhere. And they were obviously really itchy because she was just scratching at her arms, and the pus was oozing and the blood was dripping down her skin, and the pus and the blood was oozing out of her clothes. And she was shrieking in agony. Pharaoh didn't seem to care about his livestock. He didn't seem to care about the people, his people. He kept saying no. And then that night, it was the worst storm in the history of Egypt. Moses and I were huddled in the bed, and the boys came in with us because they were so scared. And the thunder, it rumbled around the house. It felt like the whole house was going to move and shake, and the lightning was flashing down. And then the hail came. It was pelting and hammering down. And Moses turned to me and said, I told Pharaoh that if anyone was left out in the fields, they would die. And some Egyptians did die. They didn't care about this Yahweh. They didn't think that it was going to affect them. And they were killed by hail. It was horrendous. Well, then came the locusts. I mean, have you ever seen a locust? It's like a giant green insect that bites and tears and devours. I mean, the locusts, they came like swarms, armies of green insects, and they just stripped the land bare. Any tree or crop that the hail hadn't battered down, the locusts just stripped them bare. Any livestock that had managed to survive the deadly pestilence, the locusts just devoured them. I mean, they devoured everything. The great Egypt was stripped bare. But even after that, when that had gone, and the last green locust had gone, Pharaoh said no. He hardened his heart again. The great morning and evening star versus the great I am. Well, the next thing that happened was the darkness. My boys were playing out in the sunshine, but as I walked to the edge of Goshen and I looked at the rest of Egypt, it was like looking into the mouth of hell. It was covered in a suffocating blanket of darkness. No one seemed to be moving. I think because they couldn't see anything, they didn't know where they were scared. It was like the absence of warmth, the absence of light, just utter darkness for 3 whole days. And then apparently Pharaoh said, "Fine, you can let the Hebrew people go." But the moment the warmth of the sun started shining back on Egypt, he said, "No, they cannot go." He said no to God. So Moses told us, all the Hebrew people, we had to prepare a meal. And so I had to go and get a lamb without blemish and prepare it for the meal. I said, "Moses, you get the fire going. I'll prepare the lamb. And boys, I want you to get your shoes on because when Daddy gives us a signal, we are going to go, okay?" I packed everything up. Yes, you can take 3 teddies each. Yes, you can take your blankie. But that's it, okay? I've packed everything else over there, so don't touch it, don't get anything out, don't unpack it, okay? Because when Daddy says, we are going to go. Yeah, okay. Got it? Right. And then I started to rub bitter herbs into the lamb after I drained the blood off into a bowl. And then we roasted the lamb and we ate it. And anything we didn't eat of the animal, we burnt up in the fire. And then I took the bowl of the lamb's blood and I took branches of hyssop. Come here, boys, here you go. Take those branches. Moses, you have that. What's this, Mum? The branches, darling. What are we doing? Okay, well, you're going to dip it in here. What's that? It's the blood of the lamb that we ate. Okay, so dip your branches in there. Put the bowl down, and we opened our front door. And I said, right, we're gonna paint all the way around the door frame with the blood. Why? Because God's going to send an angel of death tonight. But when he sees the blood around our door frame, he's going to pass over us and we'll be safe. Okay? So you paint down there. That's it. That's it. Okay. Yeah. Well done. Good boys. Okay. Right. Come on in. Come on in. Shut the door. We closed the door and we huddled around the fire and I held tightly to my boys and we waited. There was a cold breeze that came and it sent a shiver down mine and Moses' spine. And then we felt it. We felt a presence come to the door. But then it left again. I kissed my boys. I love you. We're safe. Yeah, we're safe. We're safe. And then we heard it. In the darkness of the night, we heard the cry, the gut-wrenching cry. And Elisa said, "Mummy, what's that sound?" And I said, "It's the sound. It's the sound of mothers holding their dead, lifeless children. It's the sound of mothers remember that cry, that sound. And then Moses gave us the signal. Right, boys, we're going. We gathered all our stuff, we opened the door, and we walked out. And I looked back to see hundreds and hundreds of Hebrews that had been slaves. They were coming out of their houses and tentatively shutting their doors behind them. And they walked out of their slavery towards their freedom, amidst the cries that came out that night. God led us. He led us through the wilderness. He sent a pillar of cloud that led us by day, and then it turned into a pillar of fire by night. Can I touch the fire, Mummy? No. When have I ever said it's okay to touch fire? No, you cannot touch it. I think it was the one time in our marriage that I couldn't question Moses on his sense of direction or where he was leading us. But it seemed to me like we were going the long way round. And it seemed to me, we ended up by the Red Sea, and I couldn't quite figure out where God was taking us. But anyway, we set up camp by the Red Sea, and I looked out and I saw the Hebrews. The people were starting to smile again, and they were telling stories, and they were starting to sing songs by their fires. It was just so good to see. But then we heard a sound. I didn't recognize it, but the Hebrews, they recognized it instantly. And it sent them into such a wild panic. They were running in all different directions. And I said, Moses, what is that? What's going on? And he said, it's the sound of the trumpets of the Egyptian army. They must be chasing us. And you could hear this distant rumble and clatter of chariots. I said, Moses, what are we going to do? And Moses, he started walking down to the water with his staff. And I thought, this is it. He's going to drown himself. Moses, come back. But then I watched as he took his staff and he put it into the Red Sea. And just as he did, a giant wind came from heaven and blew. It blew so strong that the waves no longer lapped on the shore, but they started lapping against one another, creating like a giant crease down the middle of the Red Sea. And the great big waves were crashing together until they weren't touching. The wind had blown them apart, and there was a great big dry path through the Red Sea with two giant walls of water on either side. And Moses turned round and he beckoned us. And I took Gershom and Eliezer and I started walking down, and all the Hebrew people, we started walking as one, and we walked on the dry ground through the Red Sea. Gershom was like attached to me like glue on this side, looking up at the wall of water. But Eliezer, he was just like hopping and skipping over all the rocks. They're very different characters. It was just insane. And Eliezer was saying, I think I saw a fish. I think I saw a whale. It was insane. But then we heard the rumble and the clatter. It was getting closer. The Egyptians, the whole army, Pharaoh and all his soldiers were after us. And so we started quickening our pace. We were trying to gather children and old people and get them to the other side. And they all clambered in. But as I looked back, I saw that the chariot's wheels were being twisted and turned. And they were being flung off their chariots, left, right and centre, into the walls of water. And I said, God is fighting for us! God is fighting for us! And when the last of the Hebrew people got to the other side, we looked back and we saw that the wind stopped and the great big waves, they came crashing down and they swallowed up the entire Egyptian army. All of the Hebrews' enemies were defeated. They were all swallowed up in the water. Whoa, it was crazy. Later on, we saw soldiers washed up on the shore. And then the Hebrew people, they started cheering and shouting and singing. And I looked at Moses, my Moses. Moses. His name means pulled out of the water. And just like he was pulled out of the water and rescued as a baby, God had a plan for this man. He knew when he pulled him out of that water and rescued him as a baby that he was going to make this man pull out his people and rescue them from the water too. And I loved him all the more for it. And you can guess what my sons, Gershom and Eliza, which story they ask for every single night before bed. Tell us, Mummy, tell us again of the night we walked through the Red Sea on dry ground. It's a cracker of a story, and it happened, and I was there.